The following teaching is possible thanks to the friends and partners of Spirit and Truth Fellowship International.
We're continuing our discussion of the manifestations of a message of wisdom and a message of knowledge. And what we're looking at now is that when God reveals something, it is revelation, and it can be knowledge or wisdom. But it's a manifestation of the Spirit when that knowledge or wisdom comes via the gift of Holy Spirit. And God is trying to communicate with us individually, intimately, personally. So He puts Holy Spirit on the inside and then very often communicates with us via that Spirit. We've already seen that in a couple examples. If we go to 2 Chronicles, for example, chapter 15, verse 1, notice how when God wanted to give prophets, energize prophets, or give people words of prophecy, then He would put His Spirit on them so He could talk to their mind directly via the Spirit on them and would not have to address them through the five senses which are available to everybody. So 2 Chronicles 15:1, the Spirit of God came upon Azariah, the son of Obed, and he went out to meet Asa. Asa was a king. And he said to him, "Hear me, Asa, and all Judah and Benjamin." And then he gives a word of prophecy. So when God wanted to communicate, in this case with Azariah, personally, intimately, He puts His Spirit upon the man and communicates to his mind via the Spirit, which no one else can see. And then as the man speaks what God has revealed to him, that's prophecy. Now, kings and judges needed to be able to hear from God in order to be able to rule effectively, sure, because you've got decisions to make. You've got to know things. You want God to reveal. We do too. We want God to be able to reveal things to us. This is revelation, and we need this. And the vast majority of the revelation, the knowledge we have from God, the wisdom we have from God is going to come to us personally through the gift of Holy Spirit, which has become part of our nature. So we look at Judges 3:9 and 10. It says, "But when the people of Israel cried to the Lord, to Yahweh, the Lord raised up a deliverer for the people of Israel, who delivered them, Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother." Verse 10 says, "The Spirit of the Lord," Spirit of the Lord, could be the Spirit from the Lord, the Spirit from Yahweh, "came upon him, and he judged Israel." So see, in order to judge effectively, in order to run things effectively, people needed to be able to hear from God. That's why He put His Spirit upon the prophets, upon the kings, upon the leaders, so they could hear directly, personally from God, right to their mind without everybody else knowing it. If we look at David, when God chose David to be king and the rule of Israel, 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 12, "And he," this is Jesse, "sent and brought him in," David in. Now David was ruddy and had beautiful eyes and was handsome. And Yahweh said to Samuel, "Arise, anoint him, for this is he." Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers, and the Spirit of Yahweh, the Spirit from Yahweh, came mightily upon David from that day forward. Because God knows He's going to set David up to reign, so He's got to be able to talk to David intimately, personally, through His Spirit, right to David's mind. You see, it says, "The Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward," and Samuel rose up and he went home to Ramah. But now what happened to David? He walked with God, and he did a very, very, very good job, but he made some serious mistakes. He committed adultery with Bathsheba, and he had a man killed so that he could hide his affair and her pregnancy. And that displeased God terribly. And when David finally came to himself and realized what he'd done and went to apologize to God, this is how he did it. In Psalm 51, verse 11, he says to God in his prayer, "Cast me not away from your presence, and take not your Holy Spirit from me." See, David wasn't ignorant about the gift of Holy Spirit inside him. He wasn't ignorant about the fact that he was able to do what he did, hear from God, understand things, know things, rule effectively, because God could talk to him through the gift of Holy Spirit. And David knew he sinned. And so he confesses his sin and he says, God, don't take your Holy Spirit from me. Thankfully, in the administration we're in, where Holy Spirit is born inside us, we don't have to fear losing Holy Spirit like they did in the Old Testament. But just like in the Old Testament, God put his Spirit upon people and he could take it off. He did that, for example, with King Saul, and you can read that in 1 Samuel 16. And the prophets and the people who were the miracle workers like Moses, Elijah, and Elisha, they needed that Spirit to have inside them the ability to hear from God, then trust that revelation, and then have the spiritual power to command those manifestations to come to pass. That's why miracles and healing, for example, are called manifestations of the Spirit in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. When God gives you the Spirit and you have that spiritual power inside you, now you can command a miracle. Now you can command a healing if you have the revelation. You take just a guy off the street, he doesn't believe God, he doesn't have the Spirit of God, he has no spiritual power inside him, no spiritual power base that God can energize. And so you say, go do a miracle, he can't. But we have Holy Spirit, and that's why miracles and healing in 1 Corinthians 12 are listed as manifestations of the gift of Holy Spirit, you see. So here, take Elijah and Elisha. Elijah's going away, Elisha's going to take over, and Elisha knows things are going to be tough, and he's seen what Elijah's put up with. And so 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 9, when they had crossed the Jordan River, Elijah said to Elisha, ask what I shall do for you before I'm taken from you. And Elisha said, I pray you, let me inherit a double share of your Spirit. Wow, what a powerful request. You see, he said, I know you have the Spirit on you because God talks to you and you do miracles, you manifest power. I want a double share of that. And of course, the Spirit was not Elijah's to give, it was God's, but in this particular case, God granted that request. Thankfully now, in the church, everybody gets a full share. The New Testament tells us that Christians are full of Holy Spirit, and thankfully, you can't get more than full. Well, then what about revelation that isn't through the gift of Holy Spirit? Because again, a message of word of knowledge, a message of word of wisdom, if they're manifestations of the Spirit, they come through the Holy Spirit. But they can be available in the five senses, absolutely. Now let's talk about a record that isn't known, it isn't well known to be this. But it's a great example of God giving revelation without it being through the gift of Holy Spirit. And this is the giving of the Ten Commandments. It's commonly taught that the first time the Ten Commandments were given, Moses came down the mountain with them written on stone. That's not true if we read the biblical record. The first time the Ten Commandments were given is in Exodus chapter 20. Moses was at the bottom of the mountain, and God spoke the Ten Commandments off the mountain in a huge voice, and everybody heard it. So in Exodus chapter 19, verse 25, it says, so Moses went down to the people and told them, chapter 20, verse 1, and remember in the original text there's no break, so the very next words are, and God spoke all these words saying, I am the Lord your God, and so God shouts the Ten Commandments down. Verse 18. Now when all the people perceived the thunderings and lightnings and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain shaking, the people were afraid and trembled, and they stood far off and said to Moses, you speak to us and we will hear, but do not let God speak to us, lest we die. And in recounting the record in Deuteronomy chapter 4, at the end of the 40 years of wandering, Moses said in Deuteronomy 4:9, take heed, keep your soul diligently. He says, Verse 10, how on that day you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb, Mount Sinai. And the Lord said to me, gather the people that they may hear my words, so they may learn to fear me and teach their children. And you came and stood at the foot of the mountain while the mountain burned with fire to the heart of heaven. Verse 12, then the Lord spoke to you out of the midst of the fire. You heard the sound of words, but saw no form. There was only a voice. And he declared to you his covenant, which he commanded you to perform, that is, the 10 Commandments. So God shouted these words down. Was it revelation? Yes, both knowledge and wisdom. Was it the manifestation of the Spirit? No, because the people didn't have the Spirit. The knowledge or revelation didn't come via the Spirit. It came via their 5 senses. They heard it. Another example of God giving revelation without it being the manifestation was when God wrote on the wall of the palace of Belshazzar in Daniel chapter 5. It says King Belshazzar made a great feast, and verse 5, God was displeased with what they were doing, and it says on the wall right behind the candlestick where everybody could see, where it was really bright, the fingers of a man's hand appeared and wrote on the wall, and everybody saw it as he wrote. So there's revelation, but it wasn't the manifestation of the Spirit. It was God revealing information in the 5 senses world.